Good afternoon, everybody. This is Scott Providenza with IGI, and I'd like to welcome you all to another session of our Webroot training program. Today, we're going to talk about virus detection and removal tips and tricks. So I have a couple topics I'd like to share with you that we're going to cover. The first is setup methodology, installation, the configuration that you might want to employ or conversation you might want to have with a customer. So they understand their expectation during a trial phase. The second would be policy settings. The third is how to identify a threat that needs your attention. The fourth session will be commands, where we're going to talk about different tools that you can use in the event of a machine being infected. Last is how do you whitelist or blacklist items. And then if all else fails, how do you get a hold of support and get your machine cleaned up with the assistance of the advanced threat team. So first topic I'd like to go through is and have the discussion, assuming you're talking to a customer that you're introducing Webroot to for the first time. The relationship and the expectation might be, I'll put Webroot on your machine, clean it up, and you're going to pay me. That's great. But if that's not the relationship, you may want to entertain some other options. And those options could include using the Webroot Analyzer, which if you go to the IGI website, igius.com, you'll notice here on the tab About Us, Partners, and Webroot. Down below, you have the Webroot Analyzer. If you click this button here, that's an executable. It can be downloaded. It can be saved to a USB drive, and it can be installed and used with your client. If you were to do that, what that looks like is an executable that runs only on the machine. It'll give a score of that machine and a detailed history of the system characterization of the applications running, as well as the configuration of that machine, which might be useful to educate that customer that there's issues on their computer and using Webroot will help them. This does not do any repairs. It does not do any logging other than on the machine itself. So this would be an alternative. Another alternative to introducing the customer to Webroot is to set them up in your console on a trial, let the system monitor machines, but not invoke any changes. So in your policy settings on your console, when you're installing them, you might want to create a policy that says, let's go in and monitor everything but not change anything, and you'll call this policy installation policy, making it your default so that every machine that installs will inherit this policy and not fix things. The settings I'm talking about would be under the scan setting, automatically remove threats found on learning scan. Well, we don't want to clean up the machine because it's hard to get paid. We also don't want to remove those threats, right, during learning scans. We want to wait, just advise that they're there, and let them know that if they pay, we'll give them another policy that will actually remove those threats. This is also found in many of the other tabs that you'll find in your policy. Anywhere you see automatic or prevent, you can turn all these on to just allow. And then this way, you'll be able to see all the threats. The customer will have the experience that Webroot's on their machine, and it would do something, and it's just going to put messages, and if they decide to pay, you would turn the policy. So that might be an option that allows you to see the machine in your console. It'll let you know that it's checking in. It'll let you know that the threats exist. And at that point in time, you can call that customer and say, look what we've done. We've identified all these threats. Would you like me to turn it on and clean up your system? And you might be able to make a sale. And if not, you just deactivate the endpoint, remove it off their computer by one button click, and they can go on using what they're currently had installed on their machine. So based on how you have your system configured and or the results you're looking for, you may want to have one of three settings, and that's the Analyze option with the Analyzer tool, or you may want to do a Monitor relationship, or a third relationship would be the Manage, where you put it on, you have a configuration of a policy that just automatically cleans up the system, and then after their trial period, you get to call them and say, look at all the stuff that we've done for you with our system, and are you ready to pay? So that would be the methodology and the different configurations for detecting and monitoring and introducing a potential customer to the Webroot product. The second category I want to talk about in our presentation today would be the policy settings. I kind of touched on the policy settings in the selling of it, but in the policy settings, if you use a variation of the MSP default policy that every dashboard has, you can highlight this, create a copy of it, call it whatever you want, and then take this policy and assign it as your default policy. What will happen here is this new policy set as default. Every machine that gets installed will inherit that policy and whatever settings you have in here. This is going to be the behavior of the agent, and depending on what you're looking for, of cleaning up the system, notifying the customer or not notifying them, this will be something you'll want to set up, because if you design this so that it's an install and forget, you're going to want a lot of the settings that I've already put in the MSP default policy. This policy had in mind that it wouldn't be bothering your client with pop-ups. It wouldn't be asking them, do they want to allow? It's going to just take care of the desired features and functions of the program, and make sure that they're protected against personal unwanted apps, make sure they're protected against malware, and make sure they're protected against viruses, including all those zero-day threats. So this is one of the things that I'll share with you is that if you take a variation of the MSP default, you'll get the really desired result where you're going to end up spending most of your time installing the antivirus and not really managing it. The one thing that I don't turn on that I encourage everyone to do is turn on this host file setting. By turning this on, that will prevent viruses from infecting your machine and making it easier for the program to keep your system clean. So detection would be one aspect of this, but prevention is another, and this would prevent the host file being modified. I don't want to turn this file on, because if I did, this could conceivably cause your engineers problems when they're trying to modify the host file for desired reasons, and or your customers. So I want you to be aware that that function exists and that you'll want to turn that on yourself. And the way to turn that on is you highlight it, turn it on, save the changes, and promote to live. Now, every machine that gets installed will inherit this new policy because it's your default, and all those settings that are in there. And again, if you want to understand what all these settings are, you can hold your mouse over this. You can watch a YouTube video up in the corner here, or you can go to the help guide, or the administrative guide, and it actually takes you right to the page illustrating every command and what the commands actually do on the machine. So here's all your policy settings. They're all under the admin guide. The fastest, easiest way to get there is open up the policy and hit the question mark, and then you can set that up. If you do this little bit of legwork up front, it'll actually make your life a lot easier managing the agents, almost making it transparent to your staff that you have to do anything except install it, and or your customers should have a favorable experience and infection-free as long as Webroot is installed in their machines. So policy settings are really important to get a desired result. The next area I want to talk about would be identifying threats. So many times I have partners call me and they say, I went to the status page and it doesn't show protected like this page does. It's more of needs attention. And if I were to go look at some other sites in our list of sites that we manage, you'll see there's a lot of them that'll say needs attention. And these needs attention get a little scary because as we go into these, you'll find that they really don't need attention. It's just that what happens is Webroot has felt that it was important for showing the end user that a threat existed, but it's been taken care of. And so if you wait 24 to 48 hours, it'll actually go back to being clean once those systems are clean. So when you'll see that, you'll find that there's really not an issue. I'll go into one of these trial dashboards and I'll show you what I'm talking about here, where the agent has checked in the computer and it's updated the dashboard. It's just the dashboard hasn't updated all the databases, and they want to make sure that you're aware that there was a machine that had an infection. So if I were to go back into here and look at this computer, let's go look this one up, and you're going to see here where the machine was infected and ultimately cleaned, and when the machine checks back into the site, it'll update that and the status will change. Because this machine hasn't checked back in since the 15th, it's still showing as it needs attention on the dashboard. It's only been, last seen date was a day later, and Webroot wants to make sure that it's clean before it takes this alert off. And so it'll wait a little bit, and then when the machine checks in the second time, it'll take this alert down. So theoretically, there's nothing to do. You can see over the past 7 days there's been no threats and no machines reported, but the alert is pointing to a machine that just hasn't checked back in to update the system properly. So under the identifying threats, this would be an example that you might see, but you don't have to worry about. The ones you do have to worry about is, I'm going to pull up another example here, and in this site, I specifically set up this machine for this purpose. It's very rare that this is going to happen, but in the event it does, I want you to be aware of this and see this. So I'm going to go into a screen here where I have a computer, the one I'm actually working on, where I infected it some time ago, and I took the machine offline so that it wouldn't clean up. And this would give you an example of, here's this machine showing infected, 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 and if I go back to the date on October 5th when it was infected, here are the threats that it found. If I want to know more about these threats, and I was watching the console, I can click on this file, and it tells me what other machines, how popular it is, when it was identified, characteristics of this threat if you care to know. You can also go into here and create an override if this is a file that I actually need. I like to ask for forgiveness rather than create overrides in advance. So if Webroot identifies something that's important, you can come in here, create an override, call it good, and then put a description. Scott needs this, and I can create an override. In the procedure of creating an override, I can actually even assign this to a policy. So in the event that I wanted to create a policy for home users, I can go into here, whitelist this for home users, and create it to a policy, assigning that policy to home users' machines, or I can keep it blocked for all the business users, and in that policy, do not include this option. So overrides have an effect on how the system works, and those overrides can be assigned to policies, and those policies can be assigned to groups or computers in a group. So hopefully that makes sense and helps you out on trying to create an override. Once you create an override, though, what you'll want to do next is you'll want to restore that from the quarantine folder. So when you restore a file, if you hit this, it's going to say, you sure you want to do this? And you're going to say yes. That's going to issue a command that's going to reside in the logs command log, and it'll say restore file. And that won't be executed until the machine checks in. So when does the machine check in? Well, that's back in the policy. And in the policy, the pull interval is 15 minutes. If you can't wait 15 minutes for it to execute, and it might even be a little longer, one option you can do is come down to the agent on the computer or advise the customer to right-click, refresh configuration. Doing so will force the agent to talk to the server, get all the newest policy changes, get all the newest updates of the software, as well as it'll allow it to pull down the agent commands that were issued to that machine, and it'll make that go faster so you won't have to sit around and wait for that to be executed. So in the event that you wanted to restore a file, that's the procedure of going about it, is first identifying what was the threat. Second is, do you want to restore it? And you can restore it, but you'll want to create a whitelist before you restore it so it doesn't get picked up again by the scanning engine. So that would be the things you want to identify when you have to get involved. For the most part, you're going to notice that when machines get infected, they don't go on day in, day out of being infected. Usually what happens is it's infected and cleaned minutes later, and that's usually the experience that you'll have using my MSP default or a variation of that default. The only reason these other ones happened is because the machine wasn't checking in and or I turned all the policies off to clean it up, so it allowed it to stay. What you can do to, so identifying, this is one way you want to notice is on the home screen, if there's a date that's old and then the date currently on the status page is newer, then you'll want to see, let me show you what that looks like. And then you'll want to pay attention. If the date is infected in the last day and it's still showing infected, chances are it's probably clean. Look at the computer, or the computer actually checked in. So to give you an example of that, I'm going to pull up one of our sites that we manage, and here's a site here. And when I go into this site, it says needs attention. So the first thing is I'm probably going to be concerned, and I look at this as 8 machines need attention. If you notice on here, this date is the 20th when it was first seen, the threat. Well, today is the 27th. So this is kind of alarming that this machine is still showing it as infected. And that typically would be the case. But if I go in here, paste that machine, look at that computer, and I notice, geez, on that computer, it was infected on the 20th, it was cleaned on the 20th, but it hasn't been seen since the 20th again. So it would appear as if it's infected. It really isn't. It just has to check in one more time so Webroot can validate it. In the meantime, though, this is clean. This might raise a red flag, but in this case, I can assure you if you called that customer and had that machine turned on, it will check back up with the dashboard and it'll be clean. More recently, you'll see a machine like this that shows infected. And if I go into here and look at this computer, what you're going to see in this machine is it was infected here on the 27th. It was cleaned again, and it was reinfected. And when that machine checks back in, like peeling an onion, it's running multiple scans to make sure that this machine gets clean. So in this scenario, we can sit around and wait a little bit longer for the next scan to trip and have it check back into the system. But what I'm going to use is I'm going to use this one as an example on some tools and how we can clean it manually if you want to make sure that it's clean before you go home or return the computer to the customer. So knowing that the policy will take care of it, you'll earn that confidence, or the system will earn that confidence over time. But in this case, maybe you don't want to tell the customer they're clean yet or return it to them until it is done. So we're going to play around with some commands here to help clean up this machine. And some of the things I want to point out, you'll find by highlighting the machine that is in question. You'll go to agent commands, and you'll come into the agent itself. You have what's called the scan button. You have a cleanup button, and you have a system cleaner button. you can issue these commands. In order to understand what all these commands do, you can come into your admin guide, which you'll find here under status, administrative guide here. You'll click that. You'll open your admin guide, which looks like this, and you'll find under managing endpoints, issuing commands to an endpoint. On this page, as you scroll down, it'll teach you how to and what the commands actually do. So we talked about the scan command, we talked about the cleanup command, and the system cleaner command, and here will be descriptions on what they do. It'll run a deep scan in the background as soon as the endpoint receives the command. That sounds like a good thing. Let's start with that. So what we're going to do is we'll come back to here. We'll go find this machine. We'll highlight the machine, go to the agent command, and we'll issue a scan, and we'll scan that computer. Now remember, the computer has to check in. So I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to come into my command logs, and I'm going to notice that there's a command scan here, which says hasn't been received yet. So when that machine checks in, it'll be executed like this. If the machine doesn't check in and it's been over a couple weeks, you may see a command like this, which has the status of elapsed. Then you'll have to reissue the scan command, call the customer, find out if the machine's still online. But the first step in getting this system clean would be issuing a scan. If you're lucky enough to have the computer in front of you, you can actually go to the agent itself by coming down in the corner, finding the Webroot icon, clicking on that, and you can hit scan the computer from here. Additionally, there's under the utilities sprocket, there's more tools, and you can go to the system optimizer. I know this seems odd, but they call it the system optimizer on the machine, and I can run the optimizer now. You'll notice that this will check for viruses and files. It'll also clean up space, and it'll check registry entries. This is very similar to the action that happens under the policy under system cleaner. The optimizer is similar to the cleaner. If you want to enable this system cleaner, you can set it on scheduled times, and it will run that optimizer. And if you tag off the different settings and features that you want it to do, it will actually go through and clean up these systems based on the characteristics that you want it to do when it's running the cleanup. So system cleaner is the same as the optimizer button that's on the machine, and based on your policy, you can run it remotely, or you can run that from the agent itself. Okay? So I also wanted to talk about one other thing on the agent, and this is the only place you can see this, so I'm going to share this with you now, is under the utilities sprocket. You hit the sprocket, not the word, but your system control. Under here, you can actually see what's in the sandbox and what's being monitored. So if I want to come in here and say there's an occurrence of this DL host, we're monitoring it, but it's allowed because this one's supposed to be. We can find out if this is legit by letting it hang out in here a while, and Webroot will monitor it and mark it as good or bad. Or if you know that it's bad or you don't want it, you can highlight it and change it, provided your policy is set up that you can do this in the unmanaged mode on the agent. If you're in the managed mode, like a silent audit is considered managed mode, or the test policy we created is considered managed mode, you would not be able to change these. So if I tried to say change it, it's going to say it's managed and we can't. So if you do want to make changes, you're going to put it into unmanaged policy first, and you'll do that by highlighting the machine in question, apply a policy unmanaged here, and then when you apply it, you can come to that agent, refresh configuration. That'll put it into unmanaged mode, and then in unmanaged mode you'll be able to make adjustments. So that's kind of a way that you can optimize and or adjust settings on the fly with those machines. So in this case, we have this infected machine. We issued a command. We're waiting for the cleanup to be executed, and it hasn't been executed on that machine yet. So If we don't have access to it, we're going to have to just wait. In the meantime, I covered a couple other commands. We can run the cleanup command, which if we go back into here, the cleanup command will actually start a scan and scan for malicious files. All of these scans take seconds or minutes at most. These are not going to scan every file and folder throughout the system. If you want to do that, there are some ways that you can issue a DOS command to the machine with a silent scan, and you can have it scan whole folders if you want, or the whole C drive. So this might be an option to implement if you want to scan every file and folder on the machine and do it remotely. What you could do in that case is you would come back to the machine, highlight the machine that you want or all of the machines. I can go and run this command on all 780 machines if I want to. I can come to the advanced, run a DOS command, paste that DOS command in there, run it on all pages, and run that DOS command. And that would execute a full scan of every file on every machine when the agent picks up that command. So that might be another option. So you can run that. A third way of doing a scan is if you're in front of the computer, is you can go into your File Explorer, right-click, and scan with Webroot. If I scan with Webroot here, it's going to be a while. It's going to scan all files on the machine, and it'll clean those up, and this might take hours. So that's another option that you can use to keep scanning. Scanning is the best way to get the machine clean. In the event that it still doesn't come clean and it looks like this, where there's lots of infections and they're not coming back, the recommendation there would be is to issue a customer support diagnostic log, and in doing so, we can minimize the time you're on support and help the engineers at Webroot so that they can remediate the issue quickly for you. What you would do in the event that you have a computer like mine that was Scott-PC, I'm going to pull this up for you and show you again on what. And as soon as this comes up, if I were to find my computer again, Scott, and here's the machine. If this wasn't clean, and you'll see all these scans happened in minutes, and it get clean, what you would do is highlight that machine, go to Agent Commands, Advanced, Customer Support Diagnostic. So when you issued this command is going to be issued to the workstation and grab a log of everything that's happening on that computer. Once that log has been executed and it gathers the information, it'll be sent to Webroot's Advanced Threat Team with your email attached to it. So if I were to submit this, I would hit Submit, and it would be in the queue under the command log again, waiting to be executed. Once it was executed, my suggestion is you go to the status page, go to Support, and under the Endpoint User and Mobile Protection, you can either contact support or you can create a ticket. If you wanted to go into here, this is the United States support team, which is in Colorado, thus the Mountain Standard Time, and this phone number would be the number you dial. If you dial this number with option 2, you'll get an engineer pretty quickly, and you'll be able to share with him your email address. He'll be able to pull up your customer support diagnostic log, and he'll be able to identify what's going on in the machine and may be able to help you get that machine cleaned up immediately in the event that there's something that's not going away by running multiple scans. The other option is you can issue a ticket, and by issuing a ticket, you can click on here, put your email address in here, submit a ticket, and then usually within 15 minutes to an hour, you'll get an answer back, and or they may even take care of the problem. What they may find is they have to adjust their policy. What they may find is that there's something that going on the system other than a virus, and they'll be able to educate you on the services that are running and or the reason maybe why it's not coming clean. So that's a really effective way to leverage the support team and allow them to be able to see into that machine what's going on and be able to help guide you quickly to a resolution. So the one thing that I touched on earlier was whitelists and blacklists, and so I want to finish up with that. And on the whitelist and blacklist option, you will find that under the overrides. As you'll see in mine, I haven't created any whitelist options. Under blacklist, I don't have any there either. If you were to create a whitelist or blacklist, you make sure you have to highlight the right tab, and you'll hit Create. Here, if I hit Create on a whitelist, I actually have the option to whitelist a whole folder, and I can come into here and say, you know, my Windows, Word folder, or my QuickBooks, or my accounting folder. I can whitelist this. If you're going to do that and whitelist a whole folder, I recommend that you keep this Detect if Malicious. This option will allow the system to still look at infections even if it says don't scan or monitor that area. So it will still keep the system clean in the event that something does get into that folder and modify a file that you've whitelisted. But if you think that it's affecting a database or accounting folder or something like that, you can override the whole folder. Again, in doing so, you can create a policy override and assign it to a policy, and then this way, any machine that inherits that policy will have the desired effect based on the override. In the event that you want to create a blacklist override, the screen's a little different. They actually require you here to put an MD5 hash key in. Webroot, if you remember, is cloud-based, and we all use the same information, and rather than have this be polluted, they like to have specifics, and they want the MD5 hash key, which is a little more difficult than just saying, let's whitelist the Ask toolbar. You'll have to know what the MD5 hash key is. There's resources on the internet to help do that. Or you can call Webroot and say, I have a file I need to block. I don't know the MD5 hash, and the tech support team will help you figure out what that file is and how to block it if you feel that you found something that Webroot doesn't know about yet. So you can create your own blacklists if you want. One way that you might leverage that is Webroot might feel that this file is not an infection, and you, like a PC optimizer program, and that you say, I don't want it. So you can make sure that none of your customers can download that and install it. And so you'll want to create a blacklist for that program because you know you don't like those kind of programs on your client's machines. But Webroot's policy is they have a couple variables that they use when they detect a threat. And one of those is, did the user go through next, 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 and agreed to an end-user license agreement? Chances are, if they've done that, maybe it's not a threat. Secondly, they might look at, is it an add remove programs? If it is, maybe it's something that isn't considered a threat. Third option might be is they compare it to a site that they own called Bright Cloud, and you can get to that website by going to brightcloud.com, which is a reputation management site owned by Webroot, and you can actually look up your own URLs and see. But if the application communicates to the internet and is known to be malicious, then Webroot might block it also. So there's a bunch of variations that Webroot looks at. Is it compromising the system? Is it sharing personal information? Is it modifying core system files that it shouldn't? All those play into their factor of identifying if it's a threat. Is it using memory? Is it using CPU cycles? Is it modifying, is it a rootkit and modifying your startup information? All those things play into their algorithms to determine if it's a zero-day threat and or if it's one that they already know about. So with this, identification will be a reason why or why not that they're blocking, and you may want to create an override. All overrides are reviewed by their team, and if they determine you found something, that will be added so everybody else is protected real time, and if not, they'll let you have your own because you created it. So hopefully this has been really helpful for you. If you have any additional needs or concerns or questions, if you find machines that are infected that aren't getting clean and you need our assistance, give us a call here at IGI. My name is Scott Providenza, and I appreciate you joining me today, and hopefully you found this helpful.